Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. It's a few minutes after 2 o'clock. I've seen some folks join and drop off and join again, so I was delaying a little bit before we get started, but why don't we go ahead and kick off? My name is Patti Smirk, and we're here today to talk about effective project communication. So this is the Simplex-IT monthly webinar on project management. We do a variety of different topics, and today we'll talk about effective project communications. So certainly as we go through the material, feel free to type some questions in the chat room. If you have any comments, feel free to add those, and I'll take a look at them before we wrap up at the end. Or if you have any questions and you just want to interrupt, certainly feel free to do so. Oh, thank you, Joe. I just got a message that my audio went out. I apologize for that. I don't know how much everybody heard. Let me just recap. So this is our NASCAR slide with all of our partners here. Should Simplex-IT be your IT department? We certainly hope so, whether we're your IT department or we are there to support and help your IT department. We'd love to help you out, so certainly feel free to reach out to us if you can answer yes to any one of these questions. Simplex-IT has a few new services. Simplex PM is the branch that I head up. And we're focusing on making project managers more effective at small to mid-sized businesses. We also have Simplex DBA. This branch helps the data and helps ensure the health and performance, usefulness of your corporate databases. So certainly please feel free to reach out to us if you need any help in that area. And then of course Simplex IT, basically your virtual IT department. I'm sure you've seen this slide before if you've sat in on any of our webinars. We just like to go over some of the services here that we offer. If you've also sat in on some of our webinars, you know that we like to do a lot of them. So here's a few of our upcoming events. The next PM webinar is going to talk about PM lingo, so kind of breaking down the communication barriers between the project managers and some of the other folks. So just kind of taking a look at some of the terminology, what it all means. Our very next webinar is September 10th. That'll be on Office 365. And you may have caught our Office 365 webinar last week. We did an intro to that. That should be on YouTube shortly. And then next month, we're going to talk about some of the gotchas. So some of the things that might trip you up when you go to implement Office 365. So as far as our PM webinars go, we've got PM Lingo in September, and then in October we've got just some tips for a successful project. So keep an eye out as well. Later in the year we'll have our annual IT Geek Raffle, which is always a lot of fun. I hope some of you got to join us for our picnic last night. That was a great time, good food, lots of fun games. If you did come to our picnic, you may remember seeing our new website. We just launched this at the picnic, so feel free to take a look at that. We'll be adding to that pretty consistently. I'm working on building out some of the PM content in there as well, so look for changes and additions to that in the coming weeks and months. So let's talk a little bit about project communications. And Tom, I see that you can't hear the audio. I just double checked. I think my audio is okay. If anybody else can't hear me, let me know. Bob, maybe you can give Tom a hand. All right, so let's talk about communicating project information. So basically, it sounds kind of fancy, you know, communicating project information, but really it's just figuring out who needs to know what. So it's so important to make sure that everybody is on the same page, everybody knows what's going on. But then also, I always caution against over communicating because not everybody needs to know every single thing. And sometimes we can get bogged down with constant information, you know. So yeah, I think part of determining a good communication plan is finding out who needs to know what, which is the very next slide. So when you're trying to determine who needs to know this project information, as a project manager, keep in mind that you don't need to determine this on your own. Typically, we talk about this in the project kickoff meeting, if not before. So right before you're ready to start the project, it doesn't have to be a big formal kickoff meeting with, you know, lots of people. Even if you're working with a small team, before you're ready to start that project, It's a good idea to bring your project team together, if it's 3 people, 10, whatever number you're working with, and talk about who needs to know what information. So these will be your resources working on tasks, your project sponsor, project stakeholders. That's anybody that's affected by the project. They might not be on the project team, but maybe they are on maybe they head up a system that will be affected by your project. So they're peripherally involved in your project. Of course, the project manager, team leads, and other people, whoever is going to be on your project team or impacted by your project. So the next question I always ask is how do they want the information? And this varies greatly. There's no right or wrong answer here. It just depends on the organization. It depends on the project. It depends on the team and the people. Some people are fine with emails. Sometimes there'll be specific reports that need to be run. Run me the monthly budget report on the first day of every month by noon. You may have something specific like that. You may be able to get away with just a conference call or a meeting or an informal conversation. So these are, again, conversations that we want to have before the project starts, just so that everybody can be on the same page. There's basically 4 different types of communications. So we have formal written communication. That would be kind of like your reports. So these are the formal reports. They're consistent, monthly, weekly, whatever. Consistent reports that you can pull usually automatically from a system. We like to hope. If not, then the project manager will be gathering this information. You also have formal verbal communication. So this is what I would consider presentations, any kind of communication about the project that's verbal, but more so than just a meeting where you're talking back and forth. Usually it's more of a one-way communication, so it's typically reserved for presentation style. We also have informal. So informal verbal, a little bit different than formal verbal. So informal would just be kind of in your meetings when you're talking about status of your project. And then informal written communications would be like your emails, meeting notes, things like that. So you basically have formal and informal of both written and verbal. Those are typically what we see in projects. And then that all fits into how they want this information relayed to them. So do they want it in a formal report? Do they want it in a formal presentation? That might be, you may do formal presentations maybe at the beginning and the end of the project, but maybe that's not necessary throughout the project. Or you may do it on certain milestones. Let's do a formal presentation, right before we do whatever XYZ task. It may be okay to just discuss in a meeting. That would be more informal. And then informal written, like I said, mostly emails. That was the very first one here. Emails may be okay as well. So again, it's just a matter of determining what the preference is there. When do they want this information? I always ask this as well, if there's a specific cadence for communication. So if there's something that folks need to know daily, weekly, monthly, bi-weekly, whatever, we can build that into the communication plan. And then determining when it's needed. This is always an oversight on my part. I've done that many times. But oftentimes this information is needed at a certain time. So maybe there's a specific day of the week. Somebody else is waiting to run a report and they need your information. So I always just like to ask, what day do you want it? Do you want it on a Monday? Do you need it by noon? Is there a specific trigger? Do you want an email every time the budget goes over a 10% variance, let's say? So it certainly doesn't have to be a specific cadence, but there can be triggers that determine when that information goes out. So I always like to talk about that as well. And there's lots of others. These are just some examples. And then what do they want? What information? We've talked a lot about who might want stuff and how they might want stuff and when they might want stuff, but what stuff might they want? So each person is going to want something specific. They're going to want something that they need to know for their job. So resources typically want to know things that are specific to their tasks. So if you have resources working on a task, they want to know things like when can they start? Um, is there a delay in their start time? Is something blocking them? Do they need to wait for a trigger maybe on their part? They may want to know the status of their work. So are they, for their tasks, are they behind schedule or ahead of schedule? General awareness I put in there. Resources may want to know the general status of the entire project. So is the entire project ahead of schedule, behind, what have you, because that might impact the time that they have to work on their tasks. And then task strategy, I put this down. I couldn't really think of a better way to describe the way tasks are completed. For example, if I'm managing a project, an IT project, I may not necessarily care what language a program is written in. As the project manager, I don't need to know that level of detail because I have confidence in the person programming it that they're going to do however, they're going to use whatever technology is a good fit. However, the resources that are working on that task will need to know that information and will need to understand that information. So the resources may find themselves communicating within each other, but other folks like the sponsors and the stakeholders and even the PM might not be interested in that specific level of detail, if you will. And then zooming out a little bit, project sponsors, usually these are the folks paying for your project. Even if it's an internal project, somebody is paying for it, whether it's with your time or they're paying for it with budget. So these folks usually like to know how the budget's going. You know, are we on track? Are we spending more than we thought we would? How much? And then these are the folks that I always like to talk to about variances, because if things are going on track, they may not want to be bothered with just, hey, everything's okay. Although sometimes those are nice emails to send. So I usually ask, okay, at what point do you want to be alerted? If we're working on a project that's, $10,000 budget and we're looking at, we're supposed to be $5,000 into it and we're already $9,000 into it, that's a little bit behind the eight ball, and there's not a lot we can do then at that point. So we want to catch those trends early. So I always try to stick with a 10% variance. So if it's looking like we're tracking at 10% over budget, that would be my flag to notify the sponsor. But everybody's different. Some sponsors like a 5%. Some sponsors want no variance at all. They want to know when anything is off budget. So again, those are conversations that we have at the beginning of the project just to make sure everybody's on the same page. Same thing applies with the schedule variances. So budget variances are money, schedule variance is time. So you may not be spending any more money, but things might be taking longer. So same thing there. I would determine what the variance is there to determine how often to notify the sponsors. Overall status and forecasting. Again, these sponsors are interested in the high level, how the project is going, and how will it be finished? Will it be finished on time, on budget, what have you? Your project stakeholders, these are the folks that will be impacted by the project. So it'll affect them in some way. Maybe they're users of a system that you're building. Maybe they're users of a system that maybe shares a server that you're building, something like that. In some way, it doesn't matter. In some way, they're affected by the project that you're doing. These folks, again, don't need to know a lot of detail, but they need to know enough to determine the impact to them. So I put here general awareness. These folks, they want to know kind of, okay, when is your project going to go live? Maybe some detail. So they may be more involved at the higher level. And then your project manager, typically your PMs like to know everything. However, the only thing I would leave out there would be the details of how the tasks are being done. Some PMs may like knowing that information, but I usually leave that up to a resource. If I'm working on a project of building a house and my roofer wants to use a certain kind of tool or a certain kind of nail or shingle, I leave that up to them. I don't care as long as the roof gets done. So that's what I mean there about specific task information. Now I do want to know if it's going to be done on time, and I do want to know if it's going to cost more money, obviously. So that information is handy. And then also, obviously, the PMs need to track problems, any issues that come up, challenges that may come up for the resources, any risks that they identify. I would always go over that with the team in our project review meetings. All right, so once you have these conversations, usually, like I said, in the project kickoff meeting, if not before, once you have all this, it's a good idea to create a communication plan to keep track of everything. It can be something informal. It doesn't have to be set in stone. It doesn't have to be anything robust or fancy by any means. But we want to have something that for us as PMs to keep track of the commitments that we've made. You know, we said we would send this report out on this day to this person. We said we would watch the budget for variances so that we could email that person. We said we would have a project meeting so that we could verbally discuss the status of projects every Monday. So those are things that I would put in my communication plan. And then I would be sure to send that communication plan to everybody so that they would know what to expect. And then also, we have to keep it updated. As we're working through the project, especially if it's a long project, things may change. You may not find that you need a report to be run every Monday until maybe the third phase of the project, something like that. So the communication plan, you may find is constantly changing. So just keep it updated, and I would then, anytime there's a change, just send it to everybody and keep them updated as well. Like I said, informal communications are just as effective. It doesn't have to be a big formal plan. A quick spreadsheet, a verbal agreement is often fine. You know, some people will just say, you know what, just shoot me an email on Friday, let me know how it's going, and that's fine. Another thing that I always like to point out is don't forget about other systems or file structures or anything else that might contain project information. And this is my not so subtle segue into Microsoft Project and Project Online, because there's a lot of information there that's readily available. So people who are waiting for all of these communications that you've written into your communication plan don't need to necessarily wait for you as the PM to send it to them. There's a lot of information available as well. So oftentimes I'll say, all right, instead of me, Patti, sending you a risk list every month, why don't you just go access it when it's already available whenever you want? And that would be in Project Online, which I'll show you in a minute. So don't forget to add those into your communication plan. All right. Why don't we go ahead and take a look at some of the communications that are available within Project and Project Online. Obviously, this would fall obviously into the written communication, whether it's formal or informal. I would think most of these would be formal, maybe informal. It doesn't really matter. But let's take a look at some of them. So right now, I just opened up a project, an old project that I had on hand. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the reports that are available. We did do a webinar previously on project reporting, so I don't want to spend a lot of time going through all of these reports, but because reporting is such a big part of our project communications, I did want to mention it. So certainly, as you're working on your projects, in Project there's a Project tab. There's a report tab, which is what I meant to go to, so the project tab. But your report tab shows you all of the reports that you have available to you, as you would expect. You can create new reports. So if you have something specific, if somebody says, look, I have this report out of my accounting system and I want you to match it out of Project, you can certainly create your own custom reports, but there's a lot of reports that are already available. So as you're working through Project, you've created your project schedule, you've added all of your all the information to each task, your duration, your resources, your links, everything. Take a look through some of these different reports. The burn down report's one of my favorites, so you can see how the project is progressing. Some of these reports I often like to show in my project kickoff meetings, if not before. Sometimes when you ask folks, okay, what do you need to know? Sometimes they either don't know, or they may tell you, sort of in their language. If you ask an accountant maybe what they need to know, they might start throwing off accounting terms to me that I may not understand. But sometimes it's nice to be able to see what's available. So oftentimes I'll show them, okay, you want to see this report, or how about this cost report, what have you. So nice to be able to have some examples. It's always easier to see examples and then determine what'll work, rather than trying to create it from scratch or listing out what everybody needs. So this is a project overview report. Just lots of late tasks on this one. You can tell this was a sample report. But I like this one because it shows the percent complete for each phase of the project. So take a look through the reporting tab. All of these, again, are available. Really nice for communicating your project information. And then also, in addition to Microsoft Project, we also have all of the Project Online features available to us. So if you are using Project Online, you'll know one of the nicest things about Project Online is that you can manage multiple projects. So Microsoft Project is great for building out your project schedule and adding resources and everything. But when you have more than one project to manage, it's hard to see them all in one view in Microsoft Project. So that's where Project Online really comes in. So you can certainly build out your project schedule here as well, but you can see on the screen now I've got multiple projects, and I can see at a quick glance the status of all the projects, the percent complete of each project, and then some basic project information. If I click on a project, I can see the details of that project, very much like what you saw in Microsoft Project. I can see the Gantt chart. I can see the percent complete is represented by the darker blue bars. The reason I like Project Online for communication is that it's always, well, I shouldn't say always. It's oftentimes more up to date than what a report would be. So if you're using Project Online for your task updates, let's say, as my resources start to submit task updates and say that tasks are completed, as I accept them, the project is updated. So it's always it's always a living, breathing document that's constantly being updated. So you're going to get more reliable, more current information from Project Online. You have risks and issues here. I like to touch on that throughout the project. If there are any new risks or new issues that are identified, I would typically add those to the list. That's another good thing to build into your communication plan as well. Resource information is available here. I can see the resources that are working on this project, and then I have some additional views available. I can see the assignments that they're working on, and I can see their availability. So this might be another good report to offer to your team, or to the stakeholders, anybody that's affected by this project. All right. Well, I just wanted to show you very briefly some of the features that are available in Project and Project Online. We are offering a free project management makeover workshop. So if anything that we talked about today sounds interesting to you, or if you want to chat a little bit about project management, or just how you manage your work within your organization, certainly please reach out to me. We can have a quick conversation over the phone, talk about how you're using the tools that you have, or how maybe Microsoft Project or Project Online might be a fit for your organization. Remember, Project Online is the cloud. It's probably not technically correct, but I always say it's the cloud-based version of Project Server. It's not. It's not exactly the same, but it's a great companion tool to Microsoft Project, and it's a lot more affordable than Project Server. So it allows you to manage multiple projects, and then gives you all the communications for multiple projects. So certainly give me a call. Let's chat about the folks using some of these tools. Let's talk about the tools, maybe how we can show you how you can manage multiple projects as well. Whoops. I hit enter instead of space. So, like I said, don't forget next month's PM webinar, we'll talk about some of the lingo with project management. I'm looking forward to that one. And that is on September 17th at 2 o'clock again. If you have any questions, certainly feel free to write them out in the chat window. I haven't seen any come through except for a few technical questions. So I'll give everybody a minute or two to type out some questions, or if you just want to ask over the phone, I think we have audio enabled for everybody. If you've come to a few of these webinars and you found them helpful, please let me know. Let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear your feedback on topics as well. So if there's a specific topic that you'd like to chat about, let me know. I'd love to get some real life questions and topics and be able to give you some presentations on what you're interested in, not just what I think you're interested in. All right, I don't see any questions coming in. So I appreciate everybody joining us this afternoon. If you are interested in listening to this again or forwarding it to any of your colleagues, we will be putting it up on YouTube. So thanks for joining us, everyone, and have a great afternoon.